In mobile application security, good enough is a vulnerability. GuardSquare delivers the highest level of security for your mobile apps without compromise. Discover how GuardSquare provides industry-leading security for your Android and iOS apps at guardsquare.com.
Good day, folks. This is Shane Hastie for the InfoQ Engineering Culture Podcast. Today I'm sitting down with Glo Maldonado. Glo, welcome. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us today.
Hi, Glo Maldonado, also known as Gonzalo Maldonado. That's my official name, if you may. And yeah, so happy to be here. A little bit about myself. In my previous life, I was staff platform engineering. I focused a lot of developer engineering and everything that basically was the socio-technical aspect of our technical work. I recently was working as a CTO and co-founder of a startup, and nowadays I'm just doing advisory roles and a little bit of consulting while trying to think about the next big thing. So yeah, so happy to be talking with you, Shane.
Cool. So that's a bit about your background. We were chatting earlier on about what we want to talk about today, and you made a wonderful point that given that this is the Engineering Culture Podcast, culture is what matters most. And obviously, as the lead for engineering culture, I agree. But why? What are the many factors that make culture so important in our organizations today?
Yeah, so like I was mentioning, I have 15 plus years of experience in the industry, and specific here in the Bay Area. If you see from my background, I had 5 years that I worked in Latin America, Mexico in specific. And one of the things that always catches my attention is how important is that the people understand the why. Especially us engineers, we really need to understand why are we doing something. And it's not just because like we want to make sure that things matter, but also because the solutions that we build really depend on us getting enough context. So talking about the culture, I think that in my opinion, like all great engineers are curious and they're detail oriented and they care about how their systems are going to impact people. So when I say that it's everything, it's because it tends to be. If you want to see on one side of the spectrum, the business side and sales side, you are trying to impress a customer. You're trying to make a customer happy, make sure that the product that you're giving them actually solves their problem. But then from the engineering side, if you have a lot of tech debt, if your developers are dreading coming to work, it's going to show in your product and it's going to show in your sales. And it's so interesting how people don't make that connection always when, for me, it's extremely obvious.
So what does a good engineering culture show up like? What does it feel like? What does it look like?
One of the conversations I always have with my engineers whenever they get to the senior levels is that you need to understand that there's two ways of measuring things. You can measure things quantitatively. You can put numbers into things and just try to hit those numbers, or you can do it by quality. And, this is especially relevant right now when, we're vibe coding and doing vibe checks and everything. This is definitely what we're doing with our engineering teams. Like you need to have like some vibe checks. And this is one of the reasons, DORA metrics, like those engineering quality metrics, I think they're important, but I mostly try to work more with space metrics. And the reason why is you need to build your own metrics. You need to identify how can you see the quality of your work impacting everything. One of the changes recently in the sales world is the Net Promoter Score. I know some people like it, some don't. But the reason I like it is because it's a simple question. It's like, how likely are you to recommend this product to someone else? And I think that's what matters the most at work. If your teammates want to recommend their friends, you're doing something great. The people are definitely excited. And it touches many areas. It touches from the code base. If you have a lot of tech debt, no one's going to want to work on that. But it's over in your engineering process, like the software development lifecycle. I don't think it's identical everywhere. Like, I think it must be different on different companies because for NASA, I want it slow and possibly even somewhat waterfallish. I do believe in Agile and even about some modes that I'm have a whole conversation about post-agile that, I don't know if we'll have time to delve into that today. But what really matters is that you understand that that life cycle is part of your culture. So even if it's a very technical thing, in the end of the day, you're trying to make people happy, your customers, and your own people happy, your internal customers, your employees. You're trying to make them happy. So yes, culture matters a lot.
Mhm. So measure the qualitative things, think about your product life cycle is a part of the way we do things here. What else? If I'm the reasonably new technologist leader, recently promoted into a position of leadership, maybe for my first time, or I'm thinking about the staff engineer versus the people leader journey, what are the things that I should be considering, and how do I make that choice?
So one of my favorite books on entrepreneurship, but I think this is applied to anyone that works in technology. It is called Who You Are Is What You Do by Ben Horowitz from Andreessen Horowitz fame. And it is true. The way that you choose how to do your actions, we forget that we're social animals. We engineers, we're still social animals. We still deal with social technical issues mostly. And this is really important because the ritual that you have, like, oh, I'm going to have this process over another process or lack of process, like that's also a process. Basically, not making the choice like, oh, we're going to be free for all. That is a decision. I love that phrase. If you don't plan, you're planning to fail. That is true. So the culture is something that is a fact. And it's also something kind of intrinsic with, human beings. We're people. We have a background. We were raised in one part of the world versus another. We have the way that we talk, the things that we care about. So all those things influence your team indirectly and directly. So it's really important, you as a leader, to be aware that, as an engineer, I use a lot of metaphors from monitoring and observability. We always talk about known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. And those are really important to understand on a systems level, period. Because your social technical system is also a system. The people that you work with, the way you work, your organization, it's a system. And if you're not aware of what are the metrics you need to track, what are the things that are threats to it, what, the good old strike weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, they apply to the individual, but they apply to your team and your whole organization. So if you're not aware of all this simple metrics, and again, they're qualitative, they're not quantitative, you're at risk. Those unknown unknowns are going to catch up with you. So you should be trying to have some systems that is something that you didn't expect. I don't know, like tomorrow, your favorite programming language disappears. That happens. I've seen that happen in this 15 years of industry, that suddenly you cannot hire any more Objective-C developers. That is probably happening right now. And those are the sort of things you need to think about. Like, okay, if that happens, how can I make a culture that either people will quickly learn Swift and we have a culture of constant learning? Those are the sort of things that really impact, everything. Your business, your engineering team, your culture.
How do I influence culture?
That is one of the most interesting questions you can ask. My first subject in high school was anthropology, and I always been curious about sociology. I still read Margaret Mead books and stuff like that. Anthropology is definitely something that I have seen so useful and so applicable on my professional life. If you don't like reading books like that, there are excellent documentaries about Mozilla, and especially what happened when they disbanded from Netscape. That is a fascinating story. I don't remember the name of the documentary on top of my head, but I recommend people looking up for that. And there's amazing work and essays by Jamie Sarwinski and others that worse is better. Basically, the idea behind worse is better in the technical terms is that if you try to build a completely clean and perfect architecture from day one, you're going to waste a lot of time. What is better is to go and start building something that it's a prototype. It is not defined. It is barely understood. And then slowly you turn it into something useful. It's interesting. And if you see the story of both languages, TypeScript and JavaScript, they started very experimental, very free-for-all. And then slowly they became something different. But it was based on the usage of people. So For me, it's fascinating. Like one of my favorite things about JavaScript is that it's prototype based. However, TypeScript, it feels very object oriented. And the reason why they chose that is, again, the culture, because it's still very rare to see people who are, Lisp experts and care about functional programming and stuff like that. They tend to understand OOP better. And yeah, that is just culture. And there is no other explanation. So how you influence that culture? There's so many ways. You can do it essays, like I mentioned, Jeremy's and Whiskey. Watch a documentary to also see like conversations happening, people building things. It's also really interesting how building things influence your culture in so many ways. And this goes back into anthropology principles. Technology and art, they're byproducts of the culture. So you have a culture, they are going to tend to go and build art to express their feelings, and then technology to, get stuff done, right? To extract resources, process resources, and stuff like that. And the interesting thing is, I think they're one and the same. One of my heroes, Theo Jansen, he makes this weird PVC sculptures that are a feat of engineering and a feat of art. And they're the same thing. He's showing that with his art, the real value of these creatures is that they influence culture. Like people, when they see these creatures, they're like, oh, I need to build one. And I used to have one on my desk. I should pull it out. But that shows that it is the technology and the art is influenced by, call it trends, call it fashion, call it whatever you want to call it. These are all cultural things. And it's really interesting to see that we forget that lesson all the time. One example that I give all the time, engineers, is, do you know why we chose TCP/IP? Because Cisco had really good marketing. So yeah, the marketing influences the culture, like books, media, and I don't know about you, but in 15 years of experience, I always run into a service called Samwise, because Samwise was a character from Lord of the Rings. And of course, we engineers, we love Lord of the Rings. And it's always about security and authentication. And that is culture. And it's a double-edged sword. You want to make sure that what you're building can be understood by someone who hasn't read Lord of the Rings. At the same time, it's good that you have engineers that have that curiosity. Is like, why is it named Samwise? And, when they later tell me like, oh, I learned Lord of the Rings or watch the movies and I love them. I'm like, exactly. That is great. That is the sort of thing that we need to do be as engineers. Like, I think that curiosity is the best way to influence culture.
So if I'm a manager tasked with employing someone, how do I know that they have that curiosity?
Well, that's a brilliant question. There are many ways, and I'm going to give the advice for both sides, both for the manager and for the interviewee. On the manager side, you need to remember that people are well-rounded. People have interests, they have motivations, like, again, going into psychology and anthropology for a second. There's a Maslow hierarchy of needs. You need to understand that people are here and they're reaching to you because they do need to feed their family. But then there's the other steps, and those really inform you how the culture is. And it's important to be aware that your culture is different than others. One of the things that I love about anthropology is this concept that there is no culture that's superior to others. There's no culture that's better than the others. All cultures are. They have their own identity, and they just are. When you know that as a manager, that's where you start getting intentionality. Like you start saying like, hey, does this person have a culture in nature that is curious naturally? And one of the questions I always ask is, tell me about your hobbies, or tell me about something that caught your attention recently. And the important thing is, I don't really care about what they do or their interest or the news they heard. I want to hear the curiosity. Or the other way I go around is I tell them the story. And people who are curious tend to chip in, like, Shane, I think you're doing a great job of being curious. You're asking me like, hey, how do you check curiosity? That is curiosity. And that is something you can filter. For me, for employers, I feel like you need to do the job of giving them opportunity to be curious. If they don't ask you any questions, usually for me, that's a red flag when I'm interviewing someone. And on the flip side, I think don't be shy. I tell everyone, you're unique. You were born an original. So take advantage of that because us managers, we hire individuals for a collective and we want to see the best in you.
Leaning a little bit into that intentionality and touching on intersectionality, how do we encourage that diversity in teams?
I think that we can see it on many sides in leadership. On one side, we can see it as a process, and the other side as a culture. When you're talking as a process, basically, if you create on your, there's a software development lifecycle. And if you build into that, like spaces for review, spaces for bring that diversity of thought, that is great. So for example, when you're about to work on a new feature, if you can say like, hey, can we meet all of us, product managers, salespeople, and engineers, put in the same room and talk about this feature, that is amazing. And that is allowing diversity of thought to come in. On the other side, I'm talking more about the culture. One of the things that I love, and this is very popular on the SRE circles, is a culture, a blameless culture, a culture that is like, hey, we don't care who broke what. We really don't care. We care why it broke. And, this is one of the most important engineering principles that I think apply both in the culture side and on the technical side, the 5 whys. Usually when you ask 5 whys, you get to the real root of the question. So let's suppose your system going down. You can be like going completely on the technical aspect, not on the social aspect yet. Why did the website went down? Oh, it was a DNS issue. Okay, what kind of DNS issue? Oh, it was this partitioning scheme or something like that. I'm not a network expert. Why that happened? Oh, because a vendor changed the way the syntax is doing. Oh, why we didn't catch that? Oh, because we didn't see the documentation. So the error was the documentation. Great. That is the technical side of this problem. But what was the social side of this problem? And let's do 5 whys, the same thing. Like, oh, why did our engineers didn't catch this? Oh, because only this certain team talks about that and deals with our networking. So why do we have so few people looking at networking? Because it requires certain expertise and being known about this syntax. So who was looking into this when this change happened? Oh, actually, no one. It turned out to be the vendor just made the change and they didn't notify our network admin that was happening while they were in vacation. This change happened. And yeah, in the future, can we make sure that there's someone else, the rotation on call ready for that? Yes. And as you can see, both sides will yield better results. If you only focus on the technical side, you're missing the opportunity of hey, we want to build a culture that is resilient. Just like you build resilient systems, you need to be, again, cultures, teams, people, we're systems. Literally our bodies are systems. There's a digestive tract system, there's a neurological system, muscular system. Everything's a system, if you ask me. So my very technical answer about curiosity, how you know someone is curious, is people that see systems. If people can see things as systems, they tend to be very curious because systems are fascinating. My whole career has been understanding systems, one or the other.
Another thing I know you're passionate about is what can we as software engineers learn from the other engineering professions?
Excellent question. So my dad, he was a civil engineer, which, civil engineering is one of the oldest professions that we have in the engineering realm. And it was a stark contrast with my engineering, which is software engineer. We're brand new. We're a couple decades old. We haven't achieved 100 years like civil engineering has. You can literally look back and be like, yeah, the Romans were doing civil engineering. They were not computing yet. Arguably, as some historians, there were some things that resemble computers, and the Incas did have computers. But for all intents and purposes, we can just say hey, the Romans definitely had civil engineers. We didn't get engineers until the 60s, 70s when we actually got, electrical machines doing this work. So there's a reason why many industries have certifications and have codes of ethics. For me, the work that the IEEE and the ACM are doing, both are professional organization. One is for electrical engineers. The other one is for software people, the Association of Computer Machinery. And They do essential work because we need to understand that our systems are a reflection of our culture. I was talking about anthropology earlier. Your culture really influences what you build. Technology is not built in a silo. The way you think, the way you work, and the people that you hire, they influence directly what you're going to be building. What we can learn from other industries is their lessons. Like, again, we are now on yet another industrial revolution. This time it's more of a knowledge revolution. So we can learn from civil engineering, like, okay, when the brick was invented, that was a revolution. When the brick was invented, what did people do in order to make sure that bricks matter? That's a fascinating and very curious story about like the Freemasons. Like people forget, like the Freemasons were a culture about making sure that these constructions techniques, even more than the technologies, the techniques were up to standards. And eventually those things influenced directly the civil engineering practices and the codes of ethics. So they were like, hey, if you get a brick of this company, you know it's not going to fail. It matters. It has certain specifications. It has certain guarantees. And again, it's culture. Like another book I really love is Sapiens by Yuval Harari. I hope I pronounced that right. And it's amazing how companies are cultures and cultures are companies, and they become like this abstract things that is bigger than the individuals. Like our professions, civil engineering, like you can see the influence of so many people on how we think. Like electrical engineer by training, and yeah, the Maxwell equations, they're the profession. Like Maxwell and Maxwell way of thinking influence everything from our telecommunications to our digital signal processing. It's all from these ideas and honestly values that Maxwell inflicted on us. And it's really interesting because like there's this actress that I also admire a lot back in the golden age of cinema of Hollywood, Hedy Lamarr. She thought like, hey, you know how in a piano you have multiple notes? Can we use that for telecommunications, for the radar? Can we use that for things? That's how our cell phone works today. It's called CDMA, it's called modulation, and it's basically saying like, yeah, you can use different codes to send data. That was a huge revolution. And it's interesting because I think we need to go beyond just thinking about the engineering practices, but this brilliant actress invented what it now is benefiting us. And she did it because she was curious and she was talking with Navy experts and asking them questions. So for me, I think we can learn a lot from, yes, our engineering practices, especially the old ones. Go talk with a chemical engineer. Go talk about their standards. How you make sure that, you know, there's this diamond shape with 4 rectangles that have different colors. They have a meaning. They have a really important meaning. And if you don't understand that code, you're going to get in a lot of trouble in the lab. I wish we had that for basically everything, you know, from my ID to our models. I wish we had codes like that. And, well, we should invent them.
A lot of interesting stuff here. If people want to continue the conversation, where can they find you?
I go by ELG, the number 0, and it's in Nancy Triba on most social media. So you can find me either way.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thanks so much, Shane. Thank you for your curiosity. I think you're a great engineer, even if you don't know it yet.